Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association webinar, Driving New Housing Supply Across a Range of Affordability Options. I'm Kristen Holinsky, the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives here at CHRA, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. So thanks all for joining us. Before we begin, I'll give you a brief overview of the webinar technology we're using today. I'll then introduce our agenda and our speakers for this afternoon's presentation. This webinar is taking place in real time. You should now all be able to see a title screen of today's presentation and be able to hear me via your computer speakers, headset, or through your telephone if you've chosen to dial in. You're currently all muted, and we do this to minimize background noise. However, if you wish to ask a question, which we strongly encourage you to do, you may type your question into the dialog box that you see on the webinar control panel. And you can do this at any time during the presentation, but we'll address any questions that we have throughout at the end of the webinar, I should say. We'll have a Q&A session after both presentations, so we'll be sure to address your questions, and please let us know to which presenter your question is being asked. If at any point you're having problems with the technology, you can call Sue-Ann Hall at the CHRA office. I'll put her contact information up in the chat box on the screen, but you can reach her by phone at 613-594-3007, extension 15. And you can also reach out to me through the Q&A chat box as well if you're having any problems or have any questions. So moving on to the agenda for today, CHRA is really pleased to have with us Shannon Dick and Michael Namath, co-founders of Radiance CoHousing in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and Suzanne Lee, Executive Director of Multifaith Housing Initiative in Ottawa, Ontario. So thank you all three for being here with us today. Before we get started, I'll set out the agenda for today's webinar, which will showcase how new housing is getting built across a range of affordability options, from a new private sector co-housing development in Saskatoon to a nonprofit charity focused on providing safe, affordable housing in Ottawa. Radiance CoHousing will share the challenges and successes they've encountered while building a new family-oriented condo development in the urban center of Saskatoon, set to break ground in the spring of 2017. So they'll talk with us today about the co-housing model, the use of design, financing, sustainability, and neighborhood impacts of the project, along with the management and community principles co-housing fosters. Also from Ottawa's Multifaith Housing Initiative, they'll be joining us to discuss a number of projects underway, including The Haven, a mix of townhomes and low-rise apartment buildings featuring multi-use community space and accessible affordable units set for completion in the spring of 2017. They'll also share work underway on their Veterans House to be built entirely through fundraising, and their mixed-tenure condo development at Somerset House. So without further ado, I now have the pleasure of introducing to you our first speakers, who are Shannon Dick and her husband, Michael Namath, who are co-founders of Radiance CoHousing. The housing complex, which is still under development, as I mentioned, is centered around environmental, social, and financial resiliency, and it's being planned and managed collaboratively by the future homeowners. Shannon is an environmental coordinator for the City of Saskatoon and works in the areas of water conservation, waste management, urban biodiversity, and the regional food systems. She has a background in both the fine arts and environmental education and is the lead landscape designer for Radiance CoHousing. Michael is a mechanical engineer and passive house professional with experience in mechanical design and energy modeling for commercial, industrial, and residential buildings. Michael provides consulting services through his own business, Bright Buildings, and offers training to building professionals in Western Canada as an instructor through Passive House Canada. So welcome to you both, Shannon and Michael. I think Shannon's going to be delivering the presentation, but Michael's on hand to answer any questions. And I now turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. So like Kristen mentioned, I'm Shannon. Mike's listening in too, so he'll join us a bit later when we get into questions. And today I'll be talking about the co-housing model, how it fills a niche in the housing market, the design and structure of our own project, Radiance CoHousing, and a few of the I guess, realities or challenges that we faced while we've been trying to establish something new in our community. So in the most general sense of the word, co-housing is a housing model that includes individually owned homes built alongside shared space. And the intent is to combine the privacy and comfort of having your own home with the community and social benefits of having close-knit neighbors. And a main thread found throughout all co-housing projects is that the layout creates opportunities for interaction between residents. So developments tend to range anywhere from about 8 to 35 homes. They can be built in urban or rural settings. And they vary in terms of housing styles, living arrangements, the age of residents, and the types of shared spaces. So, for example, here you see a rendering of Radiance CoHousing on the right, which includes 8 townhouses and has members of all ages. And then on the left, there's Saskatchewan's only completed co-housing project, Wolf Willow, which includes 21 apartment-style condos for residents who are 55 years of age or over. So the homes tend to be clustered around shared spaces that are planned into the design by the people who will be living there. And some of the benefits of doing things this way are that residents can actually live in a smaller home and therefore kind of pay for a smaller home while still having access to functional spaces and amenities. So in our case, what we've designed into our project is a large yard with an outdoor patio, cooking area, and garden. We co-own or will co-own a shared house called the Common House, where we can host events, meetings, and parties, or simply just use if we need to change a venue. We'll have a workshop and a cold room in our garage, and there's also an accessible guest room in the Common House for friends, family, and visitors to use. So the term co-housing is short for collaborative housing, in the sense that it's planned, designed, owned, and managed by its future residents. And once co-housing projects are built, they're just a condo corporation. But unlike a typical condo, co-housing uses a ground-up approach where the residents pool their money, form a development company, and work together to complete the project. So in our case, each of the households interested in the unit have purchased shares in a corporation that we formed in 2014 called Radiance CoHousing Development Company. And through this company, we've facilitated our land purchase. We've hired professional services like architectural, engineering, legal, and accounting. We've pursued a construction loan from a financial institution, and we've selected a general contractor or builder through a request for proposal process. And when our project is built, our development company will be dissolved and will form a condominium corporation to manage the property in the shared space. And because being part of a co-housing group can be a fairly big undertaking, it requires regular meetings, learning a lot of new things, and managing all of its kind of moving parts and pieces. And this is why using consensus-based decision-making is so important. It helps us stay on the same page and move forward on decisions together. Plus, investing that time into reaching consensus really pays off because it's those relationships that are going to form the foundation of the community that we'll be living in for years to come. And co-housing also tends to use a sharing economy model where residents do things like shared purchases for things like gardening supplies and bulk food. They share things that they already own, like tools and yard equipment. And because residents tend to have a mutual desire to know their neighbors, they also share who they are, by sharing their time, their knowledge, their skills, and their interests with their neighbors and the surrounding community. So that kind of gives you an overview of what co-housing is. And although it may not be for everyone, it tends to attract people who are interested in being part of a well-knit neighborhood, who are looking for practical housing options, both financially and socially, and who are looking for something more than what they would get through the other housing options on the market right now. And because co-housing is built on trust and collaboration, many people who live in these developments say that it helps reduce some of the challenges of daily life. So, for example, cooking responsibilities can be shared as little or as often as residents would like. Yard work and condo maintenance tend to be shared responsibilities. Daycare is often provided collaboratively by the families who need it. And co-housing has also been shown to support young families, people living on their own, and seniors in a more significant way than traditional housing. And even something as simple as knowing, that you have a neighbor who can look after your home or your pet while you're away, or, if you have kids, maybe they can babysit for half an hour while you run out to get groceries. That can make a really big difference. So yeah, co-housing, it fills a niche and a need by providing a more, cooperative and supportive way of living, while also reducing the individual, like your individual day-to-day costs, as well as benefiting the environment because household goods are used more efficiently. So I don't have time today to dive into co-housing's origins, but if you want to learn more about how the concept started, I'd encourage you to look into Jan Gudmund Hoyer, who made the first attempt to build a co-housing project in Denmark, and who's often cited as a key player in co-housing's beginnings. And so you can see here some of the first co-housing developments that were successfully completed in Denmark. So as of today, there are over 120 co-housing communities completed in North America and more than 100 in development. And in Canada, the numbers are a bit smaller. There's 13 complete and 11 that are on their way to completion. So co-housing is still fairly new to Canada, but I think that getting a few more projects built across the country will help make the co-housing model a better established and better understood housing option here. In Denmark, the number of projects grew as people started to learn about existing co-housing communities, see what they looked like, and meet the people who lived in them. And that kind of helped normalize the co-housing model. And although we do have a ways to go in Canada, I think we're at a jumping off point. There's been a lot in the news and the media these days about new ways of living, innovative housing models, more community-minded projects that focus on quality of life and sustainability. So I see this as a really positive step in our public discourse that could lead to more diversity in the way we live. So like with many great ideas, Radiance CoHousing just started with a conversation. My partner Mike had just returned from the Green Build conference in Toronto. Was 2011 at the time, and yeah, we just started talking about our goal of building an energy efficient home. But as we talked, we realized that it wasn't really enough for us just to live in an isolated green home. Our driver was to help create a more sustainable community while also enjoying a high quality of life, and we knew that for us that meant building relationships, meaningful relationships with other people. So we started doing some research, and it wasn't long before we found out about co-housing, and it helped that Wolf Willow was kind of in progress at the time. And the concept really stuck with us because unlike other development models and styles of building, co-housing put quality of life and community at the forefront. And it also offered a process that would allow Mike and I to provide a significant amount of input into the design, which meant that we could meet our environmental goals as well. So we invited some friends, some acquaintances, and some members of Wolf Willow to a meeting in March of 2012, and we just talked about the potential of collaborating on a sustainable housing project. And then we just kept holding meetings, and people kept showing up. So since that time, we've actually had a complete turnover of members, to the point where most of the people in our group now didn't know each other before their involvement in the project. So I guess it really shows what a small group of strangers can become. And here in this slide, you see Mike and I at one of our first meetings on the left, and on the right, this was taken at our first information night that we held to try to attract members. So as I mentioned, Mike and I really wanted to build a project that met a high level of environmental performance. And for us, that meant meeting Passive House standards and using sustainable landscaping techniques. So Passive House is an international building standard, and the approach has been established as one of the most energy efficient and economically viable design methods currently available. So for example, our homes will use 90% less space heating than regular homes, which is achieved through super insulation, air tightness, proper ventilation, modest and appropriate design, and good quality south-facing windows. And this allows us to avoid the need for a furnace and a natural gas hookup, which means that we save space by having a small mechanical room, and we save costs by having a simplified mechanical system. But this approach will still cost us about 8% more than a traditional home, and this is primarily due to the added insulation and high-performance windows. The good news is that these additional upfront costs will be recovered over time through savings on our utility bills. And although there has been some progress in the area of affordable passive house developments, there's Ottawa's Salis Clementine development, Philadelphia's Onion Flats, and Bella Bella staff housing, amongst others. The trick now is to make these options even more accessible to low and middle income earners so that everyone can live in a sustainable home. The other area of growth I'd love to see is more passive house co-housing projects, because the two models, passive house and co-housing, they complement each other really well, and they're used in combination in other parts of the world, such as Germany. But we still haven't seen a completed project of this type in Canada, so Radiance CoHousing may end up being the first passive house co-housing complex in the country, unless someone beats us to it, which would be great. But yeah, I'm not a passive house expert, so if you want to learn more, I'd really encourage you to visit the passivehousecanada.com website, or contact us, and I'll put you in touch with Mike, who is our passive house consultant. And as I also mentioned, we've designed our landscape to meet our goals of living sustainably and socially as well. So we'll have a shared yard, which will include edible and native plants, as well as one garden plot per unit. We also plan to start a community garden across the street. There's a park across the street from us, which will do that. And to manage all this food we plan to grow, we'll have a cold room, like I mentioned, and we'll also have a compost system for food and yard waste. Stormwater is also a major focus for us, which we'll be managing with a dry stream, which functions similar to a swale or a rain garden. Plus, we'll have a 9,000 liter tank underground for rainwater, which we'll use to irrigate our garden space. We'll also have bike racks and an electric car charge station in one of our visitor parking stalls. And we are looking into the cost of installing a green roof on our garage, but right now it's unfortunately looking like we may not have enough money to make that happen. So now that I've hopefully inspired you all to live this way, I do want to end by mentioning some of the realities we faced and are still facing, which have slowed down our progress and increased costs. So many of the challenges we've come across are simply because we're doing something new, and this means we're asking others to do something new as well. So for example, the City of Saskatoon's building and development process has not been easy for us to navigate, nor is it really set up for new, essentially do-it-yourself developers, which we are. So we really benefit from a bit of hand-holding and better clarity regarding what's expected of us, as well as what we can expect from the city, and maybe even one point of contact who could help us through the entire process from beginning to end, because there are a lot of people and divisions involved. Our project has also been deemed risky by our financial institution, which means that they required all of our units to be pre-sold before they would agree to provide us with a construction loan. But to have all the units pre-sold before construction even begins is almost unheard of with other condo developments, nor was it required for Wolf Willow co-housing. So hopefully this doesn't become a standard requirement for future co-housing groups in Saskatoon, because it could really slow down or even prevent other projects from proceeding. And we also feel that our project has been undervalued by appraisers. So our appraisers have primarily considered how our project compares to the current market value of the other homes in the area, and through that lens have appraised the value of our homes at a lesser value than what it actually costs to build them. So they didn't seem to factor in the cost of new construction, the added sustainability and social features that are included in our project, and the fact that the land required remediation and new site services. And the challenge here is that this has limited the amount of money we can receive from our financial institution, because they'll only give us a loan for the appraised value of our project, which, like I said, is less than the actual construction costs. So we'll have to get a bit creative to cover this gap in financing. Co-housing is also a model that requires a lot of investment from its members in terms of finances, time, and what I'd refer to as emotional resiliency. In terms of financial requirements, co-housing groups, like other developers, are required to come up with a significant portion of the project costs upfront in order to obtain a construction loan from a financial institution. So in our case, we needed to collectively secure 25% of our total project cost, which required large capital contributions from all of our members. And unfortunately, this really limits who can access this type of housing because most people just can't afford to provide such a large down payment. So if we're serious about expanding co-housing in Canada, an area of improvement would be grants, loans, or some other form of incentives that help co-housing groups and individuals cover those upfront costs. In terms of time requirements, we've been meeting approximately every 2 to 4 weeks for the last 4 years. And during this time, all of our members have poured countless hours into this project. And although we did look at hiring a project manager, there isn't anyone in Saskatchewan who does this type of work, and we couldn't afford to hire an out-of-province project manager. So Mike has essentially become our unpaid project manager because there's no way to complete a co-housing project without having somebody lead and learn the process. There are also many situations that have risen that have tested our emotional resilience. We've seemed to hit more roadblocks than green lights. The project is taking such a long time that sometimes it's hard to stay motivated. And we've also had members leave the project for a variety of reasons, which is hard. So we've just had to keep finding reasons to keep going, I guess. And we've had to problem solve our way around every barrier that we've come across. And we just keep reminding ourselves that we're working on something that matters with people who support us. And just a few last challenges, one being finding land. Because if you're looking for 5 lots side by side in Saskatoon, or any city really, you're likely looking at either a contaminated site or a really expensive site, or both. We've also had a number of challenges and costs affiliated with infill development, which isn't specific to co-housing, but it has led to some cost and time overruns. And last, we also haven't been eligible for any grants or incentives, except for one vacant lot incentive from the city. But we can't receive those funds until after the project has completed construction, plus the cost of developing a vacant lot exceed the amount of the incentive. So although we're extremely happy that this incentive exists, unfortunately it doesn't benefit us nearly as much as we'd hoped. Anyway, I'm definitely not saying these things to place blame. We've received a lot of encouragement and support from people at the city, at our financial institution, by others in the community. It's just unfortunate that many of our institutions don't seem to support this type of project or know how to support this type of approach to development yet, which has made our project difficult to get off the ground. But we'll keep working at this until we have our project built, and hopefully the lessons we've learned will make things easier for others who would like to do something similar. So I just wanted to end by saying that I really wouldn't trade this experience for anything. And I really hope that my presentation hasn't scared anyone off of co-housing, because the challenges really are far outweighed by the benefits and by the positive experiences of working with others towards something that matters. And I do think that the process will become easier over time as it becomes better established and understood in our communities. So I hope you found this information interesting, and please contact us if you have any further questions. Thanks for listening.
Great, thank you so much, Shannon. I mean, you really have started an important conversation in terms of both the benefits and the challenges in terms of co-housing. We need to be having these conversations. So thank you very much. And just we're going to switch screens here for the next presenter. So while we do that, Here we go. I just want to say that we do have some questions coming in for you, Shannon, and possibly Michael, but just one from someone in Calgary who's listening on, who's saying that they have a few co-housing units there, one named Prairie Sky and one underway called Dragonfly, that they've met with several of the owners, and just the energy is really positive and really wonderful, and just saying congratulations on what you guys have accomplished out in Saskatoon. So here we have Suzanne just pulling up her presentation, and while she does that, I'll introduce her. So Suzanne Lee is the Executive Director of the Multifaith Housing Initiative in Ottawa, and she's been there since 2013. She's experienced in leading multicultural teams, developing and delivering social development projects, and managing local organizations. Suzanne is known as an inspirational and ethical leader and a champion of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. She's passionate in her pursuit for social justice and espouses a strong belief that everything's possible. Suzanne holds her master's degree in conflict studies from St. Paul University in Ottawa and a bachelor's degree in comparative religion from Carleton University. Under Suzanne's leadership, Multi-Faith Housing Initiative has grown from 41 units to 179 with the completion of Veterans House. So Suzanne, I'm just going to unmute you right now, and the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, I'm just trying to make this into a big screen. If you just give me a second. There we go. Great, thank you all for coming today and for listening to this. Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, I'll just give you a quick overview of what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to give you a little quick overview of who Multi-Faith Housing Initiative is and some of the different things that set us apart. I'm going to also overview 3 different projects, one that's complete in 2008, one that's in construction now, and one is the next construction one. I chose those very specifically. Somerset Gardens I chose because it was a collaboration between Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, one of our faith member organizations, and also a for-profit developer. I'm going to talk about the Haven because that's a little more traditional in how we came about that development, but with a little bit of a twist to it. And then finally, I'm going to talk about Veterans House because it's a very different approach we took to it. So it's kind of 3 very different projects with different approaches, and I thought that might be beneficial to see how the 3 of them contrast. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about lessons learned with fundraising because fundraising has been a component, certainly a big component of the last 2 projects. And then also about some of the things that we've done preparing for growth because we are in the middle of a rapid growth time for Multi-Faith Housing Initiative. So Multi-Faith Housing Initiative have a mission to provide and promote affordable home space and to encourage harmonious relationships among tenants for that. We work with different faith members from across the city. We have closing in on 80 different faith groups who have a membership with us. They work out, they get to come out and they get to give a vote at our AGM on the board. Our committees are representative of them, and we are their kind of feet on the ground. So here's kind of a little snapshot. We work with the different Jewish congregations, the Christian congregations from the Catholics to the United Church. We work with the Muslim communities, both Sunni and Shia, as well as the Unitarians and the Baha'is, the Sikhs and the Hindus. So when I present Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, one of the things that makes us different is that we are a not just housing. We're kind of this organization that is representative of the peaceful and collaborative relationship between people of different faiths. And housing is the work that we do, feet on the ground, to contribute to the community. And that's just kind of a picture of some of our patrons. These are high-profile faith leaders that help promote our work in faith groups. Some of you might remember that faith groups originally managed a lot of the charitable organizations that exist in the world. Schools, churches, hospitals were all run by different faith organizations, and as kind of governments have taken over those roles, faith groups have stepped back, and we've come in to say that there's still room for these different faith organizations to contribute to society, and one of the ways to do that is through us. So currently we own and operate 41 different apartment units across the city in 3 different communities. One of them Somerset Gardens, one's Blake Street, and one's on Kent Street. We have another 98 units, that's the Haven that I'm going to talk to you about today, that is in construction. And that's a focus more on family size units out in Barrhaven. And then we're in the pre-development stage on another 40-unit complex that's Veterans House, which is housing for homeless veterans. So one of the things that we've done to kind of overcome issues around funding for us is that we've benefited because we are a charitable status organization. That makes us a little different because it's not so common to find a housing organization with charitable status that is not supportive housing. All the supportive housing organizations have charitable status, and so do we, and it gives us some benefits that come around that. One of them is that we're able to take donations, we can give receipts. One of the other things that we've done at Multifaith Housing Initiative is that we have a loan program that we call promissory notes. And that is from people in the different, our different member organizations have money sitting around that they would like to invest, or they need a little bit of a return on, or it's just sitting in the bank getting very little amount of money. Instead of leaving it sit there, they can loan it to us, and they can pick their return between 1 and 3.5%. And a lot of the times they'll donate that back to us. We have received grant funding from the different 3 levels of government. Mortgages is another way that, like everyone else, that we fund our programs. And then we get to, we've benefited from CMHC seed funding. We've received grants from foundations, again, that charitable status kind of coming in. We've received Trillium grants that's helped us staff up some of our office positions, and we've been able to do a lot of capital work on our buildings through a program here called Brighter Tomorrows, run by Hydro Ottawa. Including at our Blake building that has 26 units, we, in the last over 3 years, replaced every window in those buildings with this grant money. Another way we offset our costs is in our operation side is through volunteer work. We have 9 working committees. The idea is that each one of those committees takes place of a position that would normally be staffed, and it saves us a lot of money on that side. We have residents relations team is one of those who work with our tenants to help them make sure that they're getting their paperwork done, help them make sure that they're fulfilling all the needs that they have to have successful tenancies, and that by doing that we're able to lower our eviction rates and unit turnovers. We offer our own rent supplements to our tenants, so we have we get some rent subs through the city's rent sub program, but we also have anything that's not through that. In our current units, we have only 4 units that are considered market rent, and the rest of them are all either rent sub through the city or supplemented by Multifaith Housing Initiative. And one of the events we have is a big Tulipathon fundraiser in the spring that helps to pay for all those rent supplements. Volunteer help. One of our committees is the Housing Management Committee, which has a subgroup called Property Management Team. The Property Management Team, when we did a study on social return on investment, we found that Property Management Team on 40 units in 1 year had saved us between $60,000 to $80,000 cash in just going in, painting, doing small repairs, and whatnot. Promissory note program, as I mentioned this, we have received over $700,000 in personal loans through this program. At the end of the 5 years, so what happens with this program is they lock in for 5 years, they pick their return rate, and but none of it is leveraged against a building. So when it comes time to doing mortgages or financing, these promissory notes don't really impede on anything. And at the end of 5 years, they have the choice to either forgive the loan, to reinvest the loan, or to take out the loan. And we'll send them out a letter a year beforehand asking them what their intention is. and then doing our capital planning around that. So over the last 10 years, we've had about 200,000 out of the 700,000 donated back to us. We also get a significant amount of the interest rates checks that we send out donated back to us. So it's been a very good program for us to help us fund a lot of the work we do. On that social return and investment, we did a study of our volunteers to see kind of how they were finding the experience with us. We have 60 to 80 core volunteers who work at MHI on any given month, somehow involved with us. Because of that, one of the important positions that we do staff here is a manager of volunteers, and we were able to do that with a Trillium grant. And so this is just kind of some of what the volunteers reported on how they found their experience at working with Multifaith Housing Initiative. So Somerset Gardens. Somerset Gardens came about as an idea of one of the downtown churches in Ottawa on the corner of Elgin and Somerset wanted to redevelop their parking lot, and they had a lot of developers who were very interested in developing it and offering a significant amount of money. When the church sat back and thought about themselves and their own mission and who they were, they made the decision that they wanted to include an affordable home ownership component into the building, and they made that a criteria to the developers bidding on the land. Bill Tarrant came in, and he was the winning bid. And originally, the building was 100% affordable home ownership. This building is situated about a 10-minute walk from Parliament Hill, and these units are all one-bedroom units. They're all modestly built, but they were selling in 2008 for about $150,000 each, and the market rate for a unit like that in that location at that time would have been more around $275,000. So it was significant discount. We were able to receive a grant of $1.5 million, and with that we purchased 10 units, and we had a little bit of a mortgage as well because of different costs that kind of came up as well. We received, or the purchase cost was $1.5 million. We had grants of $90,000. We also had $250,000 from promissory notes. The remainder remortgaged. So the benefits of this was that because we only had 10 out of 109 units, there was not a lot of affordable units in the building, and really removed the stigma. We were so mixed in, they didn't know who we were or where they were. However, within 3 years of that building being built, 100% of those affordable units that were not ours were turned over to full market. The people who bought them at $150,000, although they qualified at the program going in, they turned around and they put them on the market for $275,000 to $300,000 and sold them and walked away with all that money in their pocket. But there was no way of protecting the affordability. They didn't go to other people who needed affordable units. And the church was a little jaded by that experience, that those protections weren't there. Also, one of the other lessons in this project is that the board at Multifaith Housing Initiative at the time, not one of them had ever purchased a pre-built condo, and we're not aware of some of the very common condo practices in the market, and one of them is really lowballing the condo fees in order to attract buyers. And a condo developer has to guarantee those fees for 1 year, but what happens after 1 year, you see very commonly in condos, is that their fees will double after 1 year, and you usually see them tripling in 5 years. Well, that's exactly what happened at Somerset Gardens and to Multifaith Housing Initiative. We took in all these tenants, we set their rents at very, very low rates, and then the condo fees went up and took all of the rents. And by the time I came to Multifaith Housing Initiative, we were bleeding money on this project because the condo fees were taking 100% of the rents, and we had no money left to cover the mortgage costs. So the next project I want to talk about is the Haven. This is our one that's in construction right now in Bar Haven. It's a mix of low-rise apartments and townhouses with a focus on family. It's 8 building blocks. You have 2 apartments up at the top. Those apartment buildings are going to be completed by the end of February. At the back, you have 2 rows of traditional towns. Those are all 3 and 4 bedroom units, and they will complete by the end of March. And in the middle, you have 4 blocks of back-to-back towns, and those will complete by May. This community is 100% visitable. What that means is that anyone with accessibility issues can visit any one of their neighbors. It was a requirement of the RFP, and it actually just really fit with MHI's philosophy. However, that visitability did cause some problems in getting our permits for construction around water retention on the site when you have to have everything at 0 grade entry. Now, one of the other things I wanted to talk about here was bringing in that charitable status, bringing in that fundraising component. When I say that this was a traditional build with a twist, this is what I'm talking about. Multifaith Housing Initiative committed to building 98 units. The money that the government was offering up on this site was enough to build 80 units, not 98. But we committed to fundraising $1.5 million and injecting it into the project. And by doing that, we were able to build an extra 18 units over what you could traditionally build with the money the government was giving you. With our charitable status, we were also able to offer deeper levels of affordability. So for regular not-for-profits, the standard, and I say standard, it certainly ranges from building to building and organization to organization, but the standard breakdown is 60-40, 60% at below market rents and 40% at market rents, which sustain the 60%. We, however, have our affordability set at this building for 40% of the unit to be at deep core need, which means that we are going to be setting those rents at maximum shelter allowance rates for Ontario Works and Ontario Disability, and Multifaith Housing Initiative will be subsidizing the difference. 40% are at regular below market rent rates, and then 20% are at market rate. As a charity, one of the things that we have to also be mindful of is that we are required to have a minimum of 70% of our units being lived in at all times by people who live below the low income cutoff. And we have to income test 100% of our units every year, regardless of whether or not they are market rent clients. So just the need for this kind of community, Ottawa has a centralized waiting list, and our centralized waiting list for people who are in need of affordable housing sits at right now at 10,224 people. In this community, no matter where you are a 10-minute walk from the rapid transit station, so it's a very livable community for people who don't have cars. We also have a relationship with the Catholic Centre for Immigrants, recognizing that that wait list has a large number of Canadian newcomers in there. What we did is that with the Catholic Centre for Immigrants, we offered them 6 units set aside for refugees and newcomers to Canada who are their clients, and in exchange they will offer programming right on site to all clients and tenants who meet their mandate, i.e. a newcomer at some point in time needing language training, educational training, etc. And that way we'll help get the whole community up and going. And then the fundraising part there. We also have a partnership with all the different faith communities who will be coming in and offering different programming around different faith holidays for which the whole community will be invited out, so we have a chance to kind of learn about each other and different faith traditions, make it a nice little educational piece of what it's like to live in Canada. So, Veterans House. Multifaith Housing Initiative made the decision to formally announce our intention to build this project in November 2014. We have been planning to acquire some land at the former Rockcliffe Air Base here in Ottawa, and we are working with a federal program called the Surplus Federal Real Property for Homeless Initiative, which is run through ESDC, in order to secure that land. This is a Housing First project, and Multifaith Housing Initiative does not have do Housing First. We don't do supportive housing. So we have partnered with Ottawa Salis who are going to manage the mental health component on the building. We also have built a number of other relationships into this project, including Soldiers Helping Soldiers, who are going to be doing peer mentoring, Veterans Emergency Transitional Services, who are going to help us identify veterans who are on the streets, Canadian Forces Morale and Welfare Services, Royal Canadian Legion have committed to $100,000 every year to this project to help pay. It won't completely pay, but it will help offset the cost of Ottawa Salis. True Patriot Love has helped with some of the fundraising component. Canada Lands Company is where the land is right now, and they have been very supportive in working with SURFI to help convey the land to Multifaith Housing Initiative. And Veterans Affairs Canada is going to be doing some caseworker support on site. So what we did with this project was we literally pulled this thing out of thin air. We kind of realized that there was a need and that need wasn't being met. We looked at the problem. We looked at what kind of relationships we would need to bring in to make a project really viable and good and long-term and sustainable. And then we announced that we were going to do it. We kind of announced that we were going to do it with no land, no money, or anything else, and kind of just get that momentum going from there. We have a very large fundraising target for this. As it stands right now, Multifaith Housing Initiative is intending to fundraise the whole cost of the project. This project is intended to be built to passive house, and so the cost of building the 40-unit project is estimated right now sitting at about $8.8 million to $9 million. There's some pictures of it that from our architect, Anthony Leaning, who is also the architect who built Ottawa Salis's Clementine building, which is passive house. So just kind of to go over a little bit the need for veterans. A recent survey in Ottawa has pinpointed the amount of homeless veterans, or the amount of homeless people living on our streets, as being veterans at 8.5%. We have 1,000 beds, shelter beds in our city that are at capacity every night, which means, in theory, that there are 85 homeless veterans living rough in our city. And so one of our project partners, Soldiers Helping Soldiers, who go into the homeless shelters dressed in military uniform and run peer support groups in Shepherds of Good Hope, have identified over 380 in the past 3 years. So the purpose of this project is to really target the needs specifically of homeless veterans who are living rough. To gain stable housing, recover from mental health and addiction-related issues, improve their quality of life and the lives of their families. The family piece is a really important piece. When we think of homeless people on the street, we often don't think of families, but we do have, I have had experience meeting some of the parents of these soldiers who are living on the streets, who have come in to find their children, and it's quite heartbreaking to hear these stories of them having not known where their child was for the last 3 years since they left the military, and kind of went through things that we know. We know that veterans, it takes about 4 to 7 years from the time their boots hit the ground to the time that they burn through their family relationships, burn through their friendships, and just spiral into homelessness. We know that while homeless veterans tend to be non-commissioned officers, Soldiers Helping Soldiers have run into commissioned officers who are living on the streets of Ottawa. We know that veterans also tend to be a little older than the regular population, homeless population, and better educated. And these are all out of kind of university level studies in Canada on this need population. One of the other things I wanted to say about homeless veterans is that there's a real focus with veterans when they're serving in their community. They fight in a community, they live in a unit, and their whole job is to protect each other. That brotherhood and sisterhood is a really important component. We've built that into the project. We have focused less on the individual space. These are all bachelor-size units, and we'll really be focusing on the community space to help them really kind of bond. So I wanted to talk just for a few minutes about fundraising as a tool for growth. There are some challenges that come with that. One of them is it's a lot of work to come up with the fundraising plan. And if you're fundraising at the level we're fundraising, 1.5 million, 9 million, you really have to have a full-time person who's dedicated. You can't do those kind of campaigns off the side of your desk. One of the other issues we ran into was backstopping the campaign with a loaning body. So we received our loan for our mortgage, it's an $8 million mortgage for the Haven from Infrastructure Ontario, and we had this $1.5 million fundraising component, and they had a really hard time kind of wrapping their head around that because they hadn't encountered that before. At first, they wanted us to input our $1.5 million right up front before they would even allow us to start doing drawdowns, which is impossible because you can't fundraise $1.5 million in 2 to 3 months. It takes a while to do that. And so there was a lot of negotiating back and forth on how they were going to backstop that. We had the city make some changes to the contribution agreements, which allowed us to inject $500,000 a year so that IO didn't feel like we had to put in 1.5 million at the beginning. It was just 500,000 kind of going through. That helped. It didn't fix the problem. So there was about an extra 6 months of negotiation because of that little confusion there. You also need time. If you're fundraising $1.5 million for housing, regular housing, it's a hard sell, and so you have to really take the time to really invest in your strategy and start seeing those returns, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I mentioned that the charitable status places deeper restrictions on the amount of AMR we're allowed to have. We're allowed to have a maximum of 30%, and even at that point in time, there's a list of conditions that you have to meet in order to be able to justify that 30% of average market rents. And then communications. There's a lot of time and effort in going and communicating with your membership, communicating with your supporters, and making sure that you're engaging. Doing it again, one of the other positions I would really invest in would be a full-time communications person to sit side by side with the fundraising person. Benefits, a lot of benefits. For one, it's money. It allows us to build more. It allows us to have deeper subsidies. It allows us to have less AMR. And it also gives us a place to engage the wider community. Because of our campaigns, a lot more organizations have joined MHI, a lot more organizations know who we are and what we do, and a lot more organizations and people in those different faith groups are aware of the issue of housing in the city that wouldn't otherwise have a clue, besides the homeless person that they might see occasionally on the street corner, have no clue that it's even a real issue in the city. Okay, I want to speak very quickly, just being aware of time, about preparing for growth. We are going from 41 units to 139 units this year, so kind of almost overnight. And then we're going to go up to sitting just below 200 units, also quite as quick, because our intention right now is to get those shovels in the ground for Veterans House in 2017. So one of the first things that we did as an organization was an internal inventory. We looked at our staff, what they did, what their references were to their job descriptions. We looked at the terms of references for all those committees that we talked about and looked for gaps and shortfalls. We created another committee, the communications committee, kind of came about and didn't exist beforehand. We looked at different teams that weren't full committees and whether or not they needed to be made full committees. And we also did a policy review, looked at all the policies we had in place and looked at all the gaps, and we made a list. I literally had a list of policies that needed to be created and before we got into construction, and made sure all that was done. The next thing we did was a landscape analysis, and that was looking at other organizations that were the size that we were going to be, and looked at what they look like, what positions they had, how did they operate, what policies they had, just taking a look at that. Now, everything, it's not a one shoe kind of size fits all. You have to be willing to take and leave what's good for you and what fits for your organization, but it certainly gives you a real feeling for what's needed to operate at the size that you're going to operate at. And also staff sizing, looking at the positions you have and the positions they have, and how much are they spending on salaries, and seeing where we can add and what we might need to add. And then the final one was making a plan of action. So an inventory of what changes needed to be implemented for the organization, and a timeline with 3 different categories. One was a list of everything that needed to be done before construction. Then you had a list of what was happening during construction and things that needed to be completed. And then you've got your rent up and your transitions. So by the time you're renting up, your organization needs to be operating at a level of what it is in a full rent-up situation. You can't be operating as a 41-unit organization when you're a 139-unit organization, not even for a couple of months. That can create little shortages if you're staffing up for 139 units, but you don't have the income from the rents to sustain those. You have to budget that into the development costs. And then there was a work plan created for each change. And so that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. It's just incredible the work that you're doing, and thanks for sharing those perspectives on the growth strategy that Multifaith Housing Initiative has as well. Well, I'm going to now unmute the lines of Shannon, and Michael's still here with us as well, and Suzanne, and we actually have quite a few questions. It's just coming up to 2:30. We do have the webinar scheduled for another 15 minutes, so we're going to stay on and take some questions. So hoping those of you on the webinar can stick around. We'll go back to you, Shannon, who I'm just unmuting now. There's a couple questions for you around affordability, and so the questions are: is the Radiance project aiming for a certain affordability level, and also what's the average financial commitment required by the owners?
Okay. So I'm going to start with the second question first because it's easier to answer. So the financial commitment that we've asked for from our members was 11% of the budget cost of their unit. So that ranges depending on what, we have 3 different unit models that are all different prices. So that 11% changes depending on the size of your unit. But then because, like I mentioned, we need 25% of the project costs to get a construction loan, then some members have purchased additional shares on top of that so that we could get closer to that 25%. And the remaining of that 25% is actually being supported by our builder. So that's kind of the financial commitment piece up front. And then the level of affordability that we were aiming for. When we started this project, and it was more of an idea than we didn't understand all the things that would be required and costs and whatnot. We were hoping to make it an affordable project. But just based on who our members were and our own incomes, and then just the affordability criteria of the City of Saskatoon and CMHC, we just couldn't meet the affordability criteria that they had set out. So, so I suppose we don't have any specific affordability objectives, except to I think a lot of it's kind of in the operations of the building. So once we move in, making sure that we're paying low utility fees, that we have low condo fees because we're doing a lot of the work ourselves, and then just also kind of that sharing economy that I mentioned. Preventing you from having to purchase all these items as an individual household. You get to share amongst other households. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add?
That sounds good.
Great, thank you, Shannon. And before we go back to some questions for Suzanne, give her a minute to have a sip of water there. We have another one for the Radiance team. And so a couple questions here asking, what's the minimum and maximum number of units to build for efficiency? And do you include conservation design for subdivisions with your projects?
Mike, do you want to talk about the minimum and maximum for, I'm assuming this is energy efficiency or is this,
I think efficiency and cost.
and efficiency,
yeah,
okay.
In co-housing, and there's quite a bit of literature out there and examples, and cohousing.ca, like Shannon mentioned, is a good resource as well. We've been told that the size of our project is probably too small for a lot of the common features that we do have, but we've managed to include them, and it's caused our unit prices to be to reflect that. So, for example, the other project in Saskatoon, Wolf Willow, with 21 units, they're able to spread out the cost of their common space, their shared space, among more units. And certainly it does get better as you go from up 20 or more, are the size of co-housing projects that I've seen typically.
And then there was, sorry, a question about the
what was the
second question?
To include conservation design for subdivisions with your projects.
Conservation design with, well, conservation of energy, conservation of resources, and well, actually regeneration of the land. It was contaminated, so now it is brought back into a useful place. And certainly I certainly believe that our landscaping will be made and designed to, and is designed to promote biodiversity and create urban habitat for animals and plants.
Great, thank you. We'll go back to Suzanne. There's a question about the Barrhaven project, and the question asks, can you talk about the community support secured for this initiative, and did you encounter much NIMBY'ism?
We had really good community support from this. For one, we instantly started going around to all of our faith groups in the area, in the Barrhaven area, and speaking to them about the project. When we won the RFP, we had an announcement event out in Barrhaven at one of our member organizations hosted for us, and all of our members were invited to come and hear about it. So we were able to engage the community through our faith groups. Now, one of the problems and benefits was that the community around where we were building was all in development. So there wasn't any immediate neighbors at the time we started construction. There was no community association that we could go and speak to and engage with. So all we could do was kind of through our faith groups, and we did it that way. That was a problem, that we didn't have those people to kind of go and talk to, but it was also a benefit that when we wanted to go to committee of adjustment and reduce our parking, there wasn't really anyone to come and give us any grief about it. There was a little NIMBY afterwards. People were moving into their new houses across the street, and then realizing that the house that the community being built next to them was affordable housing, because the city of Ottawa, the big sign that they put up always says affordable housing, identifies it for what it is. And so when they realized that, they instantly thought, oh, they've made a bad investment and it's going to affect their property values. And then all of a sudden you start getting these emails, and you kind of just deal with them as you go along. They can't hurt you. They can't do anything. You've already passed committee of adjustment. You just kind of manage it as well as you can. And one of the ways that we've been able to manage that is that our community there is being designed by Barry Hoban architect firm here in Ottawa, which is a really good architect firm, and they make beautiful buildings. And when you compare the looks physically of our buildings to their buildings, our buildings are, in my opinion, much nicer looking. And I don't mind pointing that out to the neighbor, that, you know, this is a Barry Hoban design building, and that we're actually bringing their property values up. They're welcome.
Thanks for sharing that, Suzanne. We have one for the Radiance CoHousing team, and comment asking if you've considered approaching developers in coordination with the city, and just that oftentimes developers have to add to their community land for public good. So this is a question from someone in Alberta who's saying that's the case there, and maybe there's an opportunity to work with developers in the cities to get some land built in lieu of paying the municipality for developing parks or installing playgrounds, those kinds of things. Do you have any experience in that area, or any comments there, Shannon or Mike?
Well, I mean, we did when we started this. We did approach some developers in Saskatoon to see, you know, if there'd be support there. Just based on the co-housing model, though, because you become your own developer, and that's kind of the premise of co-housing. It's a development type. That it seemed hard to partner with other developers who had their own projects and own ideas of development in mind. There was one potential partnership, but the vision of our project would have been lost had we partnered with them, and the costs would have gone up quite a bit higher because they were looking to profit off of the project, whereas because the residents that will be living there become the development group, we don't have the the markups that would come with partnering with an external developer. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
I think there was another aspect, but one was like, I don't entirely understand it, but development in lieu, I was at like parks, or maybe that's referring to our yard, as opposed to, you know, it's like kind of like a park. I'm not sure if that's what the question is getting at, but I guess that would be a challenge. I mean, I think it could be used in a more public way, but in a sense, it is a public space for our group, but it is still on our land and it's meant for the use of our members. But we would intend to make that available to the wider community as much as possible.
That's great. Thank you for that feedback. We'll take a couple more questions here. And next one for Suzanne. There's a question here asking you to please go into more detail about promissory notes, and asking, are they registered securities, and could a non-charitable organization offer those?
They are not registered securities. They are loans. It's a loan agreement that was drawn up by the law firm that we deal with, and it's signed by both parties and sets out the terms of the loans. But it's not sold as a security. I believe anyone could really do it. I don't think that you have to have charitable status to do the promissory notes.
Great. Thank you. So we have a question here about, you'd mentioned, this is for the Radiance CoHousing team. You mentioned that you were not eligible for a lot of incentives, and through the process of you said, going through the challenges, have you learned anything, or do you have any advice on how to avoid this if other people are interested in it, and why you weren't eligible for these incentives?
Well, I think a lot of what we've learned through this process, it will be about engaging with the institutions that maybe are making it somewhat challenging to get the work done. We've had a really positive relationship with the City of Saskatoon. We presented to City Council in March about some of the challenges we were facing to get our development off the ground, and they've responded recently with a report mostly on the challenges that they've identified to infill development, as well as challenges that they've heard not only from us, but from others in the development community in Saskatoon, and they'll also be going into kind of public consultations in January, I believe, to ask developers, you know, how do we improve some of these processes. So I think the way around this is to be communicating with the organizations that probably aren't meaningfully preventing you from doing your work, but maybe they've just never encountered a type of project that you're bringing forward. So the challenges, like with infill, they're looking at that. There also are no kind of sustainability or green building incentives in Saskatoon, whereas in other municipalities there are. So again, that's another area of just communicating with your city and your city council about the opportunities for municipalities to play a role in that. And then, you know, we had hoped to work with CMHC, but just unfortunately our project, in a way, because of a lot of the cost overruns from doing development in an infill area on a brownfield site, there are a lot of costs. Our project is more expensive, and therefore it does make it more challenging to build affordably. And then just also our membership with co-housing. I don't think you can get around the fact that you need a large upfront capital contribution, and those people are not necessarily low or middle income. Well, I guess middle income earners, yes, but they wouldn't be low income earners. So until you have incentives in place to help people access co-housing that do not have that capital money, I don't know how else you'd get around that.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing the perspectives. In the interest of time, we'll take one more question to Suzanne, and I hope I'm not overstepping by saying to our presenters that thank you we had a bunch of questions and we're not able to get to all of them. So there's opportunity to reach out to our presenters if you want to get in touch, ask more questions, or share some perspectives, because I think that's a great opportunity to connect. So the question for you, Suzanne, just to end is some interest in learning a little bit more about the specific benefits of multi-faith projects outside of offering affordable housing, and are your projects all a mixity of faiths, and are there any concerns or benefits in terms of the work that you do there?
So to be a tenant, you don't have to have any faith background at all. The faith aspect comes into the committee running and all the volunteer work that goes around running it goes along with running the organization. But there are some benefits. There's quite a bit of benefits. There's one that we have all these volunteers. We have this residence relations team that will come in. Every one of our tenants is assigned a residence relations team rep, and that is their friend who kind of bridges that place between the tenant and Multifaith Housing Initiative to make sure, one, that they're accessing any kind of benefit and community service that they're entitled to and or need. They, if they're running into trouble with communications, they kind of help around that. I have seen many of our tenants who in any other situation would have lost their housing because the resident relations team rep came in and held their hand and went with it, took them to the different organizations and helped really advocate on their behalf. They were able to get the funding that they had lost reinstated and maintain their housing. So it's one of the big benefits that we have is that. The other one for this community in the Haven is that we have spoken to all the different faith representatives in the area, and we have asked them to host events in the community around their own faith days. So Rosh Hashanah, Ramadan, Christmas, Yom Kippur, all these days we'll ask the different faith members to sponsor it. So we'll ask different mosques to sponsor the Rosh Hashanah, Ramadan and Eids, and the different synagogues to sponsor Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, but they'll come out in the sponsorship. We have a big community room, we have an outdoor space, and it will include three aspects. It will include a ritualistic aspect, it will include an educational aspect, and then food and fellowship. So everyone will be invited to come out. So you'll have your Muslims sitting next to your Christians, sitting next to your Jews, learning about and celebrating Rosh Hashanah or Ramadan or Christmas all together, and really learning how to be a good community and how to live in Canada in an interfaith environment. We recognize that there's a good number of the tenants who will be coming here who will have come from backgrounds where living in a place where you're just a little different from the neighbor isn't uncomfortable, but could actually be life-threatening. So we want to make sure we do all we can to engage this community to create the kind of Canada we want to see right here in this community.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you again to our speakers. We out of time, unfortunately, for today. So thank you very much to Shannon Dick and Michael Nemeth and Suzanne Lee for your time and speaking with us today, and for sharing these amazing projects that you're working on and the lessons that you've learned. From CHRA, we will be posting the full recording as well as the PowerPoint presentations from today's webinar on our website, and that will be up by the end of the week. So you're welcome to check back, and certainly send us any questions if you have any of those, and we can relay you back to the speakers if that's an interest of yours. So thank you to everyone for participating. CHRA's winter webinar series will begin in late January, and we'll keep you posted through our newsletter, and you can also check us out at CHRA's website, chra-achru.ca/programs for more information on our upcoming programming. So thank you very much for now, and bye for now. We'll hope to see you in the new year. Have a happy holiday. Take care, everyone. Bye.